Hello, and welcome to Tech Jackson's Healthcare Day. My name is Salam Rita, former city planner for the City of Jackson and project coordinator for the Fertile Ground Project. Today, I'm speaking with Felicia Bell and DJ Baker on the topic of food access within our communities and how we can build a more resilient future for ourselves. We will be discussing and welcome to Tech Jackson's Healthcare Day. How it impacts my name is Salam Rita, and how we combat those issues by building a more resilient system for ourselves. Today, the panel will be broken down between industry, challenges, and the future. With our community, I'd like to start by asking Felicia to introduce herself.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Felicia Bell. I'm from Brandon, Mississippi, and born and raised Mississippian, and a farmer, and our farm name is RDNS Farm.
DJ, go ahead.
Hello, I'm DJ Baker of Esculent. I am a food consultant working with food businesses and organizations, schools and communities around food access, food systems, and education and nutrition.
Thanks, DJ. Felicia, I would like you to start off by asking you to talk a little bit more about your family's history and connection to agriculture, just telling the audience a little bit more about what brought you into farming.
Well, the way I'll start with that, I'm going to give a brief bio of our farm, and then I can just really kind of explain some of the terminology in it. So again, I'm from RDNS Farm, LLC. It is a traditional fifth generation family farm, as I said, located in Brandon, Mississippi. Our farm is a communal space to learn to connect with the animals, land, and community. Our family's commitment has been to create a space for the community to come and nurture their whole self, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Our family and friends of the farm build relationship with the earth by learning techniques that work with nature. And that's called biomimicry or even biodynamics. Our farm will always uplift and honor our traditional culture and shares rich practices to all that want to learn. Our motto, food is medicine, let's restore our health. Our services include chemical-free food and educational programs, herbal remedies, value-added products such as vegan sweet treats and natural animal feed supplements. We have a young entomologist group and products, farm sitting, and infrastructure repair. And so to kind of really dive into that, we are fifth generation, and that is the fifth generation are my sons, 3 sons, and all 3 are an intricate part of our farm. They all 3 have agricultural businesses in that particular sector, and learned it all from what we have done. Now, all of this started from each generation being born into agriculture. And what I mean is we're being born into families that already are doing traditional agriculture when we come into the world. And so, one, we're learning it from, day one of smells and touches and sounds. And then as we get older, we're working with our family. And then it becomes intricate in our lives. And so when I say traditional, I want to clarify because sometimes the definition gets a little skewed. When I say traditional, I'm talking about millennia, thousands and thousands of years of historical agricultural methodologies and techniques. And so each culture has it around the world. You don't ever get away from the cultural way of doing things. And so I always want to clarify what I mean by traditional, because sometimes we mess that word up with conventional. We hear that word, and conventional is more so the modern day of farming. And so those are just the difference, more old way, or the methodologies is an old and foundational way. And then we bring in modern day ways of doing it. But again, as I read, still chemical free with everything we do, even with the animals. So again, I'll give all credit to my grandfather, and that's where I learned this particular type of farming, and now it has been handed down to my children.
Thank you for sharing that, Felicia. So, DJ, maybe if you can introduce yourself a little bit more and just talk about just your connection to farming and what brought you to Mississippi.
I am from Edmond, Oklahoma, which is where I was born and raised. Fifth generation in Edmond, and my family, came from just about post Reconstruction, from Tennessee to Oklahoma, and my great grandfather, he wasn't a farmer; he was an educator. So I definitely have education in my blood, but he had children that were farmers. But coming to Mississippi, I came through an organization called Food Corps, teaching and connecting kids to nutrition, gardening, healthy eating and living, and thoughtfulness. And that's actually where I met Felicia. Felicia and I met each other through there, and so she was a state coordinator for that program, and so she oversaw the work that we did, and that's how we ended up meeting. And after that, her and I ended up farming together, and so I used to farm with RDNS Farm myself as a partner. And honestly, we've done a lot of work together since then. But I've also worked with the Alliance of Sustainable Farms while being here in Mississippi for the past 2 years, and then formerly assistant farm manager at Pineywood School, which is one of 4 historical Black boarding schools that still exist in the United States, and just about 30 minutes south of Jackson.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's really wonderful to learn about, how people are connected here. And as our topic and title for this talk is how to build resilient food systems within our communities, we're trying to peek back into the past very briefly and understand how the past has kind of shaped our present and how we can learn from both the past and the present to shape our future. So I'm curious, Felicia, as you look back at the lineage and the history of farming within your family and how it shaped your personal identity, but also the way that you farm, what do you think has changed from the past, and how do you think it's affected our present and our future in terms of building a more food resilient community?
Yes. So the first thing that I always think about is we really forgot that food is the foundation of our livelihood. It is what sustains us. It's what keeps us upright. That's how I usually say it, and healthy. And we stopped looking at food as the cornerstone as our ancestors did. It was very, very important to them to, one, always have access to it, but always have it. And so I feel like that's one, we really lost it as a cornerstone. 2, we, of course, became so modern. And what I mean by that is, especially within the Black community, we were able to go to work. So that changed within our community, that we didn't necessarily have to be homesteaders anymore. And so when we moved into a work flow, then now we have monies to look outside of ourselves. And one, I feel like that have created a lot of our health issues too, because we are now, someone else basically is feeding us. We're not feeding ourselves. We're not choosing our foods. We're not growing our foods. So we really don't have a say in it right now. And I feel like that's really one for, as consumers, have changed us. The other, on the farming aspect, what have changed us again is the modernization of farming. Again, farmers have always known how to do this without all of the bells and whistles and gadgets and tools and all of that kind of stuff. We come from farmers that didn't have all of that. And one, they were more successful financially, and they were healthier than we are. So I always ask my farmers and even consumers, what have happened to us? We have, quote unquote, more money. We have more access, meaning, internet and all of the technologies of being able, we can get food shipped to us. But why are we still unhealthy? why? And so we have moved away from traditional, just again, my perspective, we have moved away from traditional methodologies and the way we should be, feeding ourselves.
Mhm. So you talk a lot about, just the modern movement of farming and how it shifted the way that we currently grow our own food, and but also our reliance on other larger systems, food systems that have increased our dependency. With the current pandemic that we're experiencing with COVID-19, what have you noticed in terms of how maybe some of your friends or family members have become a little bit more self-sustainable? And have you noticed a movement back towards a more grassroots system of farming? Or do you think our reliance is only increasing further on these larger farm systems?
Yes, to be honest, I've seen both. I wanted to see more. I really wanted this opportunity for people to really understand their dependency. And I was hoping it will jolt them out of that and to really start working communal, really working with their neighbors to create. One of the things that I think hurt us as a people in the United States, we're so divided and we don't work together. We want to just be separate. And yes, we have to take care of our families, and that is our responsibility. But when it comes to feeding ourselves, that can be done communally and so forth. So I have seen both. I've seen people that didn't get jolted into trying to take care of themselves better, or at least learning about it. But I have seen more consumers as well as farmers just leveling up. The farmers increasing more space to farm. So they just start tilling up more land to farm. And then with consumers, it has been an increase in more backyard gardeners. And in the urban farms have increased. They have extended some of their land mass to grow more. And one of the main things I've noticed is just intensively, they're learning, even including myself, to just grow more intensive, meaning more food in a small space. And so it has been changed, yes, but I definitely wanted to see more change when it comes to our dependency. I was really hoping people would try to do some. It may not be 100% that you can feed yourself, but if you can supplement, if you can do 50% of your grocery bill, is better than zero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. DJ, it seems like you have something to add.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think that we certainly, I think in the times of crisis, we see that people kind of go back to their roots. And I think thankfully there's a lot of people who did that. But also I think it also showed the fragility of our food system at the same time. I think in both ways it was good and it was, bad as well. You can, at a certain point, you couldn't go to the grocery store and find any mason jars. If you did find mason jars, they were overpriced. If you didn't find them in the store, so most people, hey, I'm going to go to Amazon. Well, your 12-pack of pint jars, which usually runs for about maybe $8 to $11 for a 12-pack, on Amazon was $42. Mm-hmm. And so that was one exacerbation of what's happening in the pandemic around food. But it also shows that demand was so high that people are going back to their roots. They're fermenting, they're canning, they're drying and saving back what they can, because they didn't know how long they were going to have to stay in. They didn't know, what our food system was going to look like, if it was going to collapse or not. So it was, it's good that people knew how to or ran towards back to that. But it's sad because, our prices, and access drastically changed in this time as well.
Yeah, I feel like you're bringing us into the next section, which is the focus of challenges and what we're seeing. And obviously this pandemic has really exposed the food scarcity that we're dealing with, and our access and the ability to find local food that's grown, or be able to find jars, and just the issues of supply chain that have really kind of shaken people up a little bit, shaken up their day-to-day habits and lives, and has, I think, startled people. Hopefully, during these times of fear, they encourage people to be more productive or reactive to the current situation that they're dealing with. And I was just curious, when you do talk to your neighbors and or community members, what are some of the current challenges? DJ, you mentioned access as being one of the challenges that we're currently dealing with within the city of Jackson and the central Mississippi region. We can just stick to the central Mississippi region or Mississippi in general. And can you all talk about a little bit about some of the challenges that you all see in your communities?
Well, I do want to start by saying that it's known through Mississippi State University, they studied that 90% of the food that we consume here in the state of Mississippi is not grown here. Although agriculture is our number one industry, it's an $8 billion industry. So how's our number one industry, $8 billion, but we rely on other states, we rely on other countries for 90% of our food. That's, for me, I think that's huge. And so I'm grateful that Mississippi State was able to do the research to give us that data. But I think it shows the issues more so that we don't rely on smaller local food systems. But I think that, that's definitely changing. Felicia, what do you have to say?
Yeah, basically what I saw was, one, the lack of knowledge. We had so many people that wanted desperately to grow or, put a seed in the ground, even though they may have not had the knowledge, but it wasn't there for them. And really, this is consumers now. This is consumers, because it's so many opportunities for farmers to learn. And new and beginning, if you're trying to move into that industry you have larger acreage. But when it came to mom and pop and grandparents, they just wanted to do something in their backyard, I saw just a lack of knowledge and lack of resources to assist them in learning how to do that very quickly. And so sometimes, you have failure, and, we never wanted to see that when it comes to food, when it's so many people in the state that can help. So resources and access to resources and also access to people, knowing the right people, and again, for consumers that just haven't been in play in our state. Yes, the resources for is the ones of us that were canning and putting up different things that ran in. But that's the one thing I can speak of, that as we have to start really working with our families on survival and preparedness, however you want to define it. But those types of things you cannot get when it's in a crisis. You have to always think ahead, but if you've never been taught how to think ahead, then you're going to run right up into the crisis. And so preparedness type things being taught, especially to young people, so they can help their grandparents, help their parents. They're younger, they can move a little swifter. And so if we're able to teach them those preparedness type things, if the lights are out for a month, what would you do? These are systems that we have no control of. So water, gas, food. So if we can, have some type of preparedness classes and, that sort of thing to work with everyone, but especially our young people, because they can help their families. Those were the two things that I saw that really flared up in this crisis at the first, and it's still going on. We're still within it, but March through May, it was a little chaotic for people.
Yeah, it feels like, there are resources, there is information, there's education out there, but it's about making it accessible. I feel like accessibility is one of the biggest barriers that we're dealing with. And it's sometimes when I use the word accessibility, I feel like it sounds so vague, when really I'm just saying, like, you know, being able to receive the information and being able to share it with different people. There are so many grants, there are so many resources, money, and, you know, information that's online. It's kind of about collecting all of it and sharing it with people in a way that's equitable. And you know, I feel like, how do we do that? You know, how do we connect people with that information? How do we create these like resource centers, Felicia, that are touching on the exact things that you're talking about, which seem like such mundane, basic, day-to-day things, like, you know, but how do we connect that information into the communities directly that need it the most? Because sometimes I feel like you can just be like, oh, you can just look it up on the internet, it's there. But sometimes that's not helpful. You know, how do you do that work in the community? How do you get over that hump and provide that opportunity for people?
Yeah, one of the things I think of is vocabulary. It's yeah, because it is a big task to try to pull all these websites, but keywords. Most people just do not know how to research, you know, just that. And so if you have vocabulary and the key words to type in, just the words, to then a grandchild can type that, because we know the children can utilize the internet, so, but they don't know what to type in. And so if we had just a simple vocabulary list of words and keywords that could be typed in on a Google, Bing, or whatever, that gets them started. Because yes, it's too vast to create a database when it's so much out there. But to me, it's the research aspect that I see that most people just don't know what to type in to get to that. I always say basically the pot of gold. When you can type something in, it's like, boom, I have my answer. And I see that as a barrier for a lot of people.
I think also utilizing the people around you, that community, to find out that information. And that's something that I've worked to do, especially with the consulting side, is how do we, you know, get people connected to people who know these things, people who are doing these things. One thing is we started, Felicia and I, we had the idea, but I ended up starting a Facebook group, Mississippi Community Farmers Market Community, trying to get people across people who support farmers markets or people who go to farmer markets and sell there, trying to get them connected all on one group on social media, together across the state. And I think I started, honestly, 2019 or 2018. And there was just a few members. Honestly, it was just about 100 members. But since the pandemic, we've gone from just a little bit under 100 members to over 700 members in just a matter of less than 6 months, which I think is incredible. So I saw directly through that group that people were looking, people were searching. And so I've constantly tried to invite more food producers to say, hey, this is what you have, but also the consumers to say, hey, this is what area of Mississippi I'm from. This is what I'm looking for. This is what I need. And so thankfully, there's been that cross connection through that one Facebook group. And so I'm grateful that you know, an idea I had 2 years ago, which just had a few members, I didn't realize how it would help create access in a situation like this. So I'm grateful that the idea came up and that I started the group, and because you know, a lot of people probably wouldn't have gotten that information otherwise.
Mm-hmm. And what's the name of that Facebook group again?
Mississippi Farmers Market Community.
And that's for both vendors and the greater public, or?
Yes. And that's the point, is trying to connect people to their local producers. That's the sole purpose. Because a lot of times, some people don't have time or access or the opportunity to make it to the farmers market to know who goes there. But they're on social media, they're on Facebook, but sometimes some of the producers, they're so small that they don't also know how to run a Facebook business page. And so they don't have a Facebook business page. So if I look up a particular farm name, they may not have a page, but they still have a name. They still have a profile for themselves personally. And so there's access, through that, just them having a profile at all.
We are like maybe a generation, like some families are like a generation completely removed from farming, and some or multiple generations for other families. I think it just kind of depends on, the history of your family. I know for my family, I'm like one generation removed. So my mother wasn't farmers, but my grandparents were farmers. And so I feel like growing up, I just thought, hey, this is just the way that it is. I get my food from the grocery store. I don't get it from a farm. Chicken nuggets come from Kroger, not from a chicken. And, making that connection for people, being able to see it, I think that's also something that's really important. And I feel like that's a challenge to get over, is just understanding that things don't have to be the way that they are. We can change things. I'm curious about your thoughts about perception and a move past, and try to make sure that people know that we can change things and that we don't have to be doing things the way that we do.
One of the things that I try to, with young people, even younger than DJ, is think about what if. We have to start thinking about what if this happens, and not in a notion of fear now. It's still preparedness. Being prepared so you can make sure that your family is okay. We mostly think about it monetarily, as long as I have money, my family is okay. But I think we're, 1 or 2 generations away from not understanding that when crisis occurs, sometimes money don't mean anything. You can have all the money in the world, but it can't buy you any food. It can't buy you clothing. It's just, and again, we are not there, but thinking of those things, because we all of us, our lights have turned off, but we just have not ever thought about, our lights being turned off for a month or a year or 6. We've never thought about that. And so I always like to ask young people to think about that. And then that's when they go into researching how to answer those types of questions. And then we are here to assist, so not doing the work for them, just see, can they really come up with the answers for themselves? Because as you stated, each family is unique. So it's not a cookie cutter type thing on what your family is going to need in a time of crisis. Each family during the pandemic was all different in their need, especially if you have an elder in the home. So you have to make, some people had to make sure they had electricity. So they're going to have generators and more than one, because they have to have electricity because their grandparent may be on a ventilator or be on oxygen or whatever, but that electricity has to stay on. So each family is very different. And so I would say, first, to get over this, farming is labor intensive, and thinking about most definitely in our culture is always, regarding being enslaved and, people making us farm. We got to get over that. That's not happening in 2020. But we do have to think about our survival for as food is concerned. Because again, I have to keep reiterating that we have a lot of sick people around the world, not just in Mississippi, not just in the United States. And we have to look at how did that occur? We're talking about 60 plus years of eating the same type of food. And so we have to be realistic and open our eyes to say, okay, I need to possibly, step back and reassess where and how I'm getting my food.
Yeah. I think there's also, on that, it's having access to resources. I think the word is resources, to combine all these, because resources is food, resources is it's water, it's shelter, it's information, it's education, it's networks, it's people, it's community around you. All those things collectively are resources. And the question is, do you have resources to everything that you need to survive? And so I like checklists. That's a thing for me. And so I'd ask myself, hey, analyze what is it that I need to survive, and how do I obtain these different things, with money or without money. I think that's a good way to put it. And even health is a resource in itself as well. A lot of people may not see it that way, but when we have a industry, whether you're looking at hospitals or you're looking at food, like a organic natural supplement health food store, both of those still, you're using monetary resources in order to obtain these levels of health. And so health is a resource. It is a monetary resource at this point. And so I think it's also thinking about things in that perspective. And so Felicia, I really appreciate you, touching on, preparedness, because I think all of us go through some moment in our lives where we don't have exactly what we need. We don't have everything that we need. And so by building and banking on those resources and getting your nest together, your foundation together as your survivability, I think is really important. So I think it's a bigger part of the conversation of food resiliency, because I think food resiliency is also economic resiliency. I think it's mental and social resiliency. I think it's more than that. I think the foundation of the culture is in food. It is in agriculture. And so food resiliency starts with access to those resources.
I think that anyone that eats is a food activist in some way, or can be, because we all need food to survive.
Yeah.
And because of that, food becomes the foundation of everything. In my opinion, I totally agree, DJ. And as we think about that, what are some of the ways that we can begin to build some of that resilient system within our communities? And, just kind of unpacking, what resiliency means to you. I feel like it means something different to each one of us. Felicia, I feel like for you, it's like about the foundation of being a survivor, being prepared, and being able to grow and build from there. And maybe that's kind of the common ground for what resiliency means for this conversation. Also, we can totally unpack that as well. But just understanding, what are the different ways we can start to do that within our communities, and what does that look like through careers or entrepreneurship? So I just want to pass the floor over to Felicia, and DJ, you can follow up.
Yeah, and I'm gonna speak on all aspects. One, I'm starting with family. So being resilient with your family is just start growing. Seeds are very inexpensive, and if you're new to it, start with pots. Start with a raised bed, which is just soil on top of the ground, and having something to hold the soil together and keeping it stationary. So start there. Other thing is fruit trees, herbs, and we're not talking about a lot. One fruit tree per year, because it can work with anybody's financial background. So with families, it's starting in your backyard. So that would be for food resiliency, I would start there. Or as what DJ talked about, our network, our community resiliency, is start talking with your neighbor and neighbors with an S to say, hey, can we start working together and creating food resiliency in our community? So that, I would love to see, and this is a dream and a hope, that every backyard had food in it to some sort of degree. Like I said, it's not going to be 100% all the time, but it can be, though. But that's a lot of learning and so forth. But you can, a family of 4 can feed themselves on their back, from the backyard. When it comes to entrepreneurship, I'm always, as I spoke of, our children can become entrepreneurs regardless of their age. And so many, I think, parents don't feel like that. They think they have to be adults before they can move into something like that. But I'm just a firm believer is letting young people shine in whatever industry they want to be in. Why do we have to wait till they go to college? They can kind of get their feet wet in that industry. And one of the things that we have spoken about offline is our young people that are doing mechanical engineering and various engineering pertaining like to drones. We have our drafters, which I call them drafters. That's an old name, but the ones that are able, and Salam, you can help me with the title, that draw out city specs or draw out type of areas in their community. But we have young people that do that already. They already doing they have their scrapbook and they have all these drawings in there. But if we just had a few adults, it doesn't take but one adult to say, hey, you know what? We need a park over here, and can you draw that for us? We have to pull them into it. And of course, it's going to be an investor in the city and communities and our home association people, the adults work with those investors, but pulling in the children on those different types of projects, that is so wonderful because it gives them buy-in to their own community. I always speak about the drone operators and stuff. A lot of children have drones, but no one ever talks to them about, hey, you could be one of these people that help farmers, help city engineers, because you're able to move that drone across so they actually can see. This area is definitely in I know in Hinds County, that you can't get back to with a car, a truck, or even a ATV. You would have to use a drone to be able to see property lines and so forth. And so utilizing our children in that aspect when it comes to skills, a lot of the children already have it, and as they get older, high school age, then they can start, attending Hines Community College that we have here in Mississippi, and different 2-year or 4-year colleges if they choose to get more. But that's not a necessity if you already have the skill set and someone allows you to just expand on it and you learn from actual work, like you're actually doing it. And these are things that definitely you can go online and look up for as agricultural jobs. But I'm just going to, just give a few. So definitely you can become some type of specialist. So you could be, livestock specialist. You could be horticulture, which that's dealing with our vegetables. And then the other, I think, is viticulture, which dealing with our vineyards. We also have Burma composting, which composting is, dealing with actually creating soil, but creating soil from our waste. But it's actual people work and do that in larger cities. And so it's still thinking about what you would like to do, that you may not even think is agriculture. A lot of people don't think it's associated with agriculture, but you have various levels as well that most, I think, people don't think of. You could get federal jobs, but you could be on a federal level and work in an office. It's agriculture is not always just outside. So you can have a federal job. It comes down to state jobs as well as local, city, state jobs. So it's so many aspects, and that's why it's very vast. But just think about nature. What in nature? Someone has to, test our water and make sure our water is clean. So most people don't think that's agriculture, but it's a natural resource. So that's when it comes into people have to test our soil and make sure of contamination, our air, and then also our animal population, our tree population. So whatever a person would think of is a job for it.
Yeah.
And I'll add to say, there, across the whole food system, there's even more jobs. I mean, you think about from from the farm to the table. There's so many, or from the farm to wherever else. There's I recently saw that Ford was using the shell of coffee beans to use that. They get a shell of coffee beans from McDonald's and using that shell to mix it with plastic and use it to make their cars, to make certain parts for their cars. And I thought that was, incredible. So, they're trying to, do their thing in conservation and so on and recycling, but there's scientists that figured out, hey, we can use the coffee bean shells the chaff in order to make this piece that goes around your headlights, and that it's also very heat resistant. So it's cool things to learn about that. But there's also a website I want to mention is Good Food Jobs, I think .org or .com, but Good Food Jobs, if you look that up, they actually are a great resource to for people, for food businesses, and for people looking for jobs to post on there and to find job positions to post on there.
So as we begin to talk a little bit about these, non-traditional roles in farming and the green economy and sustainability, something else I'd like to unpack a little bit further that's part of the tech and Tech Jackson, which has, economy, is maybe understanding and talking a little about cooperative systems of creating entrepreneurship and how even in the non-traditional roles in farming and in agriculture, how we can also think about revolutioning our economic and capitalistic system to be more equitable through structures like cooperative business models. And I'm curious about your thoughts in how that connects to farming, green economy, and sustainability.
Mm-hmm. And I love the cooperative model, and it definitely has been tweaked and revised all over the world. And so just to give a kind of backstory of cooperatives in general is helping one another. So you're joining as a member, and this again speaking along the lines of food, agriculture cooperatives, but it's many other type of cooperatives. But you're joining to help each other out. In one aspect, you're pooling your money together to buy in bulk. So a lot of our farming cooperatives are started for that reason. For an example, if you want to buy hay, and a farmer may not have hundreds of dollars to buy the amount of hay that he or she needs, but then they can pool their money together to get larger bales, and then now they can buy either that bale from the cooperative, or they can pool their money together to buy together. So it's so many various ways. Other is working together on the same mindset. So you could be a cooperative of sustainability. So cooperatives are built on the mindset of the people. Whoever the members are, you build it on that. And when you talk about economy, one, like I said, you pool your money together to buy, but you also can pool your money together as the membership, paying your dues, as well as getting businesses, getting contracts. So for an example, a farm cooperative can, as DJ said, he's a consultant, I'm a consultant, but now if you're working together as a group and you have a new and beginning farmer, that cooperative utilizing 1 to 2 or up most of 5 people, they can go out and assist a farmer from 0 to 100. So they can teach them every single level, and that new and beginning farmer will pay that group of farmers, which is representing the cooperative. And now how it's divided usually, and you don't have to do this, but it's usually divided quote unquote in your thirds, I would say. So a portion is going to the cooperative because you're representing the cooperative. And then you have what I call kind of like quote unquote a savings account. So it's also this offshoot account for the members. So those 1 to 5 members, the third of that money will go on account for just those 5. So it'll be divvied up evenly into this account for them. And then third, the people that actually work that day will get paid that day. So it's basically divvied up like that, but you as a member can go out and get these types of jobs. That's why I always try to push this, definitely with young people, but any age, is creating any type of cooperative. It could be a barber. You know, if you're a barber shop, you could create a cooperative. Most barbers have more than one barber in this building. You could create that where everybody now is divvying in to pay the mortgage on the building. It's not on one person. So cooperatives can work, but again, it's understanding how they work. It's what I've noticed that have kind of made cooperatives fail because they don't know the foundation of how to start a cooperative.
We have talked about so many different things, and I feel like there's so much more to say, but unfortunately we are limited on time. But I want to thank DJ and Felicia for joining me today and talking about all of these great things and sharing their stories and their histories with us. I really appreciate that. And DJ and Felicia have also helped us create a short book list for people who are interested in learning more and want to know how. So we've created a short book list here where people can tap into different authors who talk about farming practices, agricultural resistance, Successful Growers Handbook, the history of transformation in our food. And also, if you want to reach out to DJ and Felicia, I've included their social media handles and their email. And then if you'd like to learn more about the Fertile Ground Project, we also have our information here. Thank you both again so much for spending time with us today. I really hope that that people took something away from this. And any final thoughts, Felicia and DJ?
I appreciate the invitation and just really enjoyed our conversation. But I just want people to grow food. That would be my last thought. And always just keep in mind there's someone around you that wants to help you get started.
And I'll add to that, yes, grow something. You might be afraid to grow it. Just do it. Honestly, it just starts with doing it. And yes, you're going to kill some of your plants. Yes, you're going to find some type of insect that you may not know what it is. And that's okay. Most times it might actually be safe. And that's okay. I encourage the curiosity. I encourage you to open your mind and continue to become curious, because that is where the growth happens. And also you'll end up finding sparks of joy in this process as well. So take it with stride, take it with enthusiasm and an open mind.
Thank you both. Take care, everyone.
How's that going? Huh?
If you're a person like me that doesn't have any transportation, you don't have any other option or choice. I'm on my way back, just pouring down rain. Everything, cereal boxes and stuff like that, oatmeal containers, boxes and stuff like that, all they get wet and soggy. And the oatmeal boxes, they got the little packages, or instant oatmeal. They have the little packages where that's made out of paper. So if that box gets soggy and all that water just soaking up into that, then it soak up into the oatmeal packages. All they get wet, that's destroyed. So You know, I can't get all the items that I want to get because I can't take all that on the bus. You know, they only let you have a few items. If I had to go grocery shopping today, I have to put off. Okay, if I catch a bus to Kroger, I gotta catch the bus. They gotta take me downtown. That's gonna take about 20 minutes. Then I gotta wait on my transfer. So that means I might make 2 trips or whatever. I might have to make 2 or 3 trips. So you're looking at what? That's $9 right there, because it's $1.50 there and $1.50 back. It'll be about 2 hours, almost 3 before I can make it back home. I really can't afford it.
The expansion of Jackson and sort of its sprawling nature creates a lot of accessibility issues. Jackson is very car-oriented, it's very car-centric. We don't have good public transportation. We don't have sidewalks. We don't have bicycle lanes. And when you don't have those things and you have low-income communities that have low car ownership, it becomes a real problem for them getting access to grocery stores, especially when those grocery stores are not placed within those neighborhoods.
Right.
What's the hard?
Right.
Father God, thank you for protecting us. Thank you for all that you've done and you made me.
Don't bless the food.
I hope you just bless the food. In Jesus' name, amen.
My first job in high school was Dairy Queen on Terry Road. You know, at that point, I think it was a Subway the last day, but now it's closed. But now you look down Terry Road, it's hardly no food options anymore. You don't see much at all anymore. I try to support the businesses that's in this area, you know, from even going to the different restaurants like throughout the week. Try my best to support them, even though a lot of them may be higher. But if we don't support them, it's going to close. Here. And then you're going to have another empty building.
When Brookshire's left, Albertsons and Brookshire's, when they left, they had way more EBT transactions than like cash on hand. It's like all these reasons why these main chain grocers leave was like heartbreaking.
Crazy.
Right.
It was like because poor people were using your store, it wasn't profitable.
Absolutely.
You know, like both Krogers are gone. Like that's like crazy to think about. Like there was enough space to support 2 Krogers that weren't, you know, like that far apart. And now both of those Krogers are gone, and then nothing really filled that space. This is the old Kroger on Terry Road, my second job. There's a side parking lot over there. Like kids would hang out over there and the police wouldn't really bother them too tough. Like it was a community, right? Like this was one of the good things in South Jackson at that time. That's just what it was. Like it wasn't like people stopped coming. It was a grocery store here. And then they told us that the grocery store was leaving. What happens in South Jackson is what happens everywhere, right? Like you have white flight and then you have economic flight. And then after you have that, then it just gets abandoned. Some communities are deemed better than others or more valuable than others. Those people kind of get to keep access to food. They don't give poor Black people access to healthy institutions. Like that's just not what working class and poor Black people get in America.
And a lot of this is due to the historical ramifications of redlining, where it makes it a high-risk environment for these grocery stores to come in and open up locations because it's just too expensive, or they won't get the insurance in order to open up these grocery stores within these neighborhoods. They're low-income neighborhoods that don't have opportunities.
Jackson is the largest city in the state. It deals with a lot of problems, almost kind of like rural places where we have these intersections that are like flooded by fast food and gas stations. It impacts people very differently. Like one of the things that I can only imagine how difficult it would be to try to feed multiple children quickly because you don't have access to these things close by.
We haven't been to this McDonald's. We haven't been to this McDonald's. What do you guys want?
Nuggets. Nuggets.
And ketchup. Can I get 2 chicken McNugget kids meals? Let me get the 6.
Convenience is an issue that we all deal with. You can be someone who is from a upper middle class family or a low income neighborhood, and you'll struggle with the same challenges of convenience.
Sometimes you're just left to feel like you don't have any choices, sort of like the choices are being made for you.
I'll take 3 apples.
Fast food chains exist because it's cheap, it's convenient, and it's addictive. And it's profitable for corporations because it's so efficient.
What I don't like is that there just aren't any healthy options. Not in this part of town, at least. Schedules get crossed up, so you just gotta do what you gotta do.
The health inequities that we're seeing on the local and national level are created by our culture of convenience. In order to change, we need to talk more about fast food convenience and how this obsession with efficiency has affected our lives.
This is rich soil where so much has taken place. We have impacted history not only locally, but internationally in Mississippi. People know of the heinous history of Mississippi. Poverty is the worst form of violence that you can inflict on people, and it manifests in so many ways. Food insecurity is one of those many, many ways.
Food insecurity and hunger in Jackson did not happen by accident. Food insecurity is what happens when law, policy, and politics fail the most vulnerable members of our society. Food insecurity is the result of human-created system of segregation that relegates some people to food opulence, primarily privileged white members of our community, and relegates others to food scarcity, and primarily communities of color and Black Jacksonians. It's impossible to have a conversation about systemic solutions without starting by acknowledging and addressing, tailoring solutions that address those root causes.
Mississippi is one of the only states in the country that still has a tax on groceries. On average, a family in Mississippi pays about $600 more a year on groceries because of the grocery tax. It's bad for our farmers, it's bad for our small businesses, and it's bad for our families.
If we don't alter our infrastructure and rethink our food system, we're going to end up with a larger public health crisis than we currently have. We're going to end up with a city with dilapidated infrastructure because things are extremely spaced out and dependent on larger networks. We really have to rethink and redesign our food system.
Hunger is a major cause of why people cycle back into the prison system. It's lack of resources. A lot of the homeless actually know of certain crimes that would get them the correct amount of prison time to actually get them off of the streets from the cold, as well as to get them several square meals. Yeah, and that's the truth. What happened is somebody was eating lunch here. He threw out his sandwich. One of the homeless went after him and ate it. And I'm like, that's a problem. And through our program, Are You Hungry? We're trying to alleviate that problem. When we first started, we were feeding 5 people, but it can range anywhere between 70 to the highest number we had was about 170 at one time. Well, it's also not just a matter of feeding them, because there were other groups that were doing that. What made us different is that we weren't afraid of them. We recognized them for their soul and humanity. The most important thing missing in this entire system is love. A lot of people don't ever get that.
People are not okay. It's a lot of people hungry. I mean, we even thinking about the school system where they may eat lunch and that might be it until lunch again.
I think that school lunch and breakfast, the whole school day, when you think about the education system, is centered around those 2 time periods. The schedule is centered around lunch. The class periods are centered around lunch. Breaks are centered around lunch. It's obviously so important that the whole education system is centered around it. You have oftentimes poor performing schools because kids are not getting the basic needs that they have to perform well in school. Like, there's no motivation greater than not being hungry right now. The snacks that teachers provide just out of their own pockets most of the time for kids, all of those things are just so important. And I think when we talk about policy, sometimes it's an afterthought, and that support just looks like policy and legislation that supports them having the tools that they need, which is healthy food and healthy food options.
The system that we have currently for school lunches is very strange. A lot of people don't understand that school cafeterias are separately ran from the school. Education funding does not actually trickle down to the school. Most kids today don't experience food like our parents or our grandparents did. It's important to have those relationships between local farmers and local schools, because farmers meeting with food service directors, nutritionists to create a healthier, simple, a more whole food menu that the students can be able to see, experience, and of course, at the end of the day, enjoy.
When we're talking about solutions related to food apartheid, it's important to have local resources that could help develop local food economies, self-sufficient food economies, because when it's something that we create from within, it can't be taken away.
Do you know your boxes? And then back here, make sure everybody gets. Mississippians in general, they're truly hospitable. Everybody wants to do something good for you when you come in. So it's the people that make it great. I believe that growing in your backyard, in your coffee can, that you can make a difference and you can live healthier.
Just knowing where I come from and the type of people I come from gave me a love for agriculture. There's a bad stigma especially with African Americans on farming. That's probably the biggest challenge right now, is just trying to shift their culture.
Farming reminds people sharecropping, which reminds them of slavery. There's a generation gap where, because of what our ancestors had to endure, that the youth don't necessarily want to be digging in the dirt.
You think those things are important until you look around and you see your mom with diabetes. How did that happen? When you look to see people, babies in school taking insulin, how did that happen? So the things that I thought was so important really isn't. It's family. It's life. Making a difference that you can see. You know, it's not just about putting seeds in the soil. It's about putting seeds in the minds.
A new culture, a culture that's centered around healthier, more sustainable, more affordable food. As much as Jackson is urban, it's also very rural. I mean, we've got so much, grasslands and so much land that is undeveloped or underdeveloped.
I mean, just around this farm, there's over 60 acres of vacant land. If you were able to just put a fraction of the land into production, then you would fundamentally change what food access looks like in the city.
We have incredible climate here for growing food. Jackson is a prime location in so many ways for green infrastructure. Green infrastructure is essentially developing food, water, energy, and waste systems within cities that is taking industrial zoning or commercial zoning and transforming those pieces of land into a productive landscape, trying to alleviate some of the environmental problems that we're facing with climate change by also feeding people or creating ecological or environmental benefits, creating oxygen into the city, reducing the amount of heat that's within the city, cleaning water in the city.
Common misconception in Mississippi is that we have the most fertile soil in the world, or some of the most fertile soil. Well, at one time it was, but the industrial agriculture complex has murdered that. It has demolished the biological systems in the soil by dumping chemicals.
The industrial food system is so dependent upon all these other factors, the subsidies, the cost of oil, being able to truck things long distances and these long shelf life crops, that just one thing can tip the scale and remove food access from a community.
As we increasingly experience the effects of climate change, developing localized food systems becomes much more imperative. A natural disaster, an economic crisis, or even a pandemic can totally disrupt our global food system.
It's easy to live in Mississippi. It's affordable to live in Mississippi. But food prices are actually higher here in Mississippi, especially if you want to go get organic food. Certified organic certification is expensive. It costs farmers thousands of dollars. Small farmers can't afford that. Subsidies is why organic food is so expensive. The U.S. government is paying a part of that price on the behalf of the taxpayers.
You have to do what you have to do to support your family, and I understand that. But if you're just growing one product and the government's paying for it, I don't see why the government couldn't pay for them to grow a bunch of products that could help feed the state.
The state is not feeding people. The state's agriculture is about exporting goods, exporting commodity crops. It's not about feeding the people here. Mississippi is #1 in food insecurity.
I think over 60% of our food here in Mississippi comes from somewhere else, and that shouldn't be. We have millions of acres that we're farming on, and we just shipping out.
This Fertile Ground project is a huge opportunity to address the spatiality of distances and thinking about how to create food access.
You know, to get it right down the street and have someone growing that kind of stuff that's super fresh. I mean, you can still hear it crack when you go to taste it. It's just got that super fresh, crisp flavor. And you don't get that from stuff that you buy from big box vendors and things like that.
We're looking at how we redefine ourselves. What do we do differently now to grow this economy back? It's not just about growing the food here. It's about the whole system of what it takes to grow food.
Jackson is really primed to become a leader in urban agriculture, green industry, and the development of the next generation of farmers.
It makes more sense for farmers to sell directly to restaurants, to sell directly to grocery stores. It makes more sense for the farmers, the consumers, and for the retailers as well.
Some of the stuff that's being grown here in the state of Mississippi is just, it's incredible. I mean, the ground here is perfect for what they're growing. You get some of the freshest collard greens and mint, kohlrabi, green leaf lettuce, curly kale. You use sweet peppers, hot Portuguese peppers, yellow lemon peppers, white radish, red potatoes, purple turnips, and sweet salad turnips. We use scallions or green onions and red radish. We need to really start working on educating people, and you don't have to go to your major grocery stores to buy produce. You can go to a farmer's market and get something that was grown here.
You use local products. You make sure that you pay people fair wages so they can support themselves. You are aware about the effects of growing crops seasonally, how that affects the environment. Like, it's always been those things traditionally that chefs have a responsibility to do. It's bigger than me. It's more than me. Being responsible about it. It's out of honor and respect for my people, my ancestors, my relatives, what I was taught. I come from farmers those things were life. Like that's just part of who I am. And so it's just really important to me to honor them in that, in being that type of chef, making sure that my visibility in the things that I do, redefining what a chef's responsibility is now. It wasn't just feeding people, it was sharing what you had with somebody else helps us all. Like that is the healing, that is the nurturing of food. That's why I do this. Like I find more and more ways that food heals not just myself, but as I'm healing myself, that goes out in the food that I create.
Industrialization has really created an alternative narrative for what food should be. Food should not be a product. It shouldn't be just a consumption sort of tool. It should be a cultural and community tool. And we're moving farther away from that if we continue to treat it like a product and an industry.
This guy I know was telling me how when they were growing up, they would always just see, the standard life building. And all they would see at the top is just standard life. And they would think, like that's all we get is a standard life. Like what does it mean to just have a standard life? Is our life just meant to be default? Like you don't get anything more than that. And what does it mean to be in one of the richest countries on the planet? And this is all you get, is this poverty and this pain and this suffering. People can't be prepared to challenge the circumstances we see in Jackson, or for that matter, challenge the circumstances we see in the world if they can't have the very basic necessities that they need. Food is a very basic necessity. And it's an indictment on this country, right? We operate from a place of scarcity when we actually live in a world of abundance. And so the fact that we can see hungry children and feel that that is okay to operate in that space, to operate, in that type of a system, really speaks to our values as a nation. We can't look a child in the eye and say that we care about your future, we care about your destiny, and they're hungry. We can't look at circumstances that communities are suffering from, like crime, and talk about how we need to be a harmonious community and how we want to see crime eradicated. And we're really looking a child in the eye and they see the insincerity in us when we say, well, we care about you, but yet you're hungry.
If we've learned anything from all of this, it's that we need to come together and radically transform our food system. Something has to change.
Hello, everyone. My name is Travis Crabtree. I'm one of the project coordinators for the Fertile Ground Project and a producer for the Fertile Ground documentary. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Cindy Ayers Elliott, CEO of Footprint Farms, a 68-acre urban farm located in West Jackson, Josephus Martin, a Jackson-based artist and also a producer on the Fertile Ground documentary, along with Dr. Chigo Ndumba, is that correct? The director at the Office of Health Equity at the Mississippi State Department of Health. Thanks everyone for virtually being here with us today. This discussion succeeds participants of Tech Jackson watching the Fertile Ground documentary. The film takes an extensive look at the impact of the industrial food system and what it has on Jackson, Mississippi. It follows advocates in Jackson who are using localized efforts to address food insecurity in underserved communities, shining a light on the potential for a healthier food system through efforts to convert the system into more of a localized food system. So there are a lot of themes within the films and within the film that we can discuss, but I think that we would sort of want to focus on, within the time that we have, on thinking about what the future of food looks like in Jackson and what a more equitable and sustainable food system looks like for the city and action steps for how we get there. So I want to begin with Dr. Ayers sort of just talking about, you know, what that future could look like and what type of work that you're doing within this space right now to help achieve those goals.
Good morning or good afternoon. It's great to be here, and especially to be talking about something that's so close and dear to all of us, and that's our food and our access to food. Here at Footprint Farms, we're very, very proud to be a part of this great program and to talk about what we have to do, continue to do, in order to make sure that we have the proper food for our community. So for us here at Footprint Farms, right here in West Jackson, we're excited to continue our progress and our programs on training farmers and gardeners who want to learn how to grow their own food, to give you access to everything that you need in order what you should know, the correct information. So right here, we are still doing a lot of food, a lot of vegetables, full-time, 24 hours a day is growing. My farmers here are excited about the possibility of learning more and growing more. So for the coming year of 2021, we intend to do another expansion of Footprint Farms. We did some expansion in 2020 in order to help meet the crisis of this pandemic, and we're still moving forward on our whole aspect of bringing access of healthy, affordable food to our city of Jackson and to all the citizens.
Chico, could you talk a little bit about what your office is doing to combat the current sort of food crisis and epidemic that we're seeing and how it's overlapping health and what sort of the future steps that you guys are taking?
Yeah, so the Office of Preventive Health and Health Equity, we're looking at a number of different things to really address the social determinants of health. One of the key things that we know is food insecurities is a major issue across the state and specifically here in Jackson. And so we're looking at opportunities to address the different kind of issues that plague our city and our state that when we talk about access. And we can look at access from many different angles and directions. One of the key things that we talk about is giving people the opportunity to be able to afford food and making sure that those opportunities exist. And so we have partnerships with groups like the Department of Agriculture that are really looking at opportunities to help people afford fresh fruits and vegetables. And that is one of the key things, is making sure that people have access to healthy foods and not just foods. We know about our WIC programs, we know about SNAP benefits and how they've been making changes to really address and address those issues and provide actual access to those different things. But we're looking at programs and partnerships and really looking at those key partnerships that are really going to help both our consumers, but also some of our producers as well. So the Department of Agriculture has been able to identify local growers, local farmers that are able to assist us in providing access to not only fruits and vegetables, but also local access. So not just access to grocery chain stores, but having people allowed to be able to buy their foods within their own cities instead of having to travel 30, 45 minutes to a grocery store to do those different things, because we know that's a burden as well when you talk about trying to pay for gas and on the wear and tear on vehicles and all those different things. So we're looking at those different types of issues, as well as how do we educate people on what are the proper things and how do we navigate those processes whenever we're going to stores to buy things. And so the educational piece, whether it's diabetes management, hypertension, cancer control, or any other chronic disease issues that we're trying to educate people on the nutritional part, we're also trying to close those gaps with taking that from education into practice and allowing people to take that information and actually put it in practice and then see the change and difference as well. And so really looking at key partnerships as well as trying to help those consumers as well as those producers to work together to build a healthier Jackson.
Josephus, Chigo mentioned access and how distance really affects the access to not just food access, but health access, learning access, and transportation. You live in South Jackson, and you're mentioned in the film, and you have the segment in the film when the grocery store leaves South Jackson. You know, what do you think the future of South Jackson's food system could look like if, you know, if a Kroger maybe were to return, or does a Kroger return? Does it look differently? Does it look like a local food grocery store? Does it look like local farmers that are supporting that store? What is sort of your vision for what happens with food access in South Jackson?
Well, so using South Jackson as kind of an example, there are grocery stores in South Jackson, right? The thing is, those grocery stores don't necessarily provide the types of foods or the types of products that consumers would like to consume, right? So there is a very big difference between what's available at Save-A-Lot and what's available at Kroger, right? And those things could be the same. I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't shop at Save-A-Lot. Those things could be the same, but I don't know that to be true, right? Because of that, because, you know, Save-A-Lot has a lot more packaged goods, the produce isn't that good. I think that is an opportunity for people that are locally growing things to stock that market. One of the challenges, though, is that we're gonna have to recognize that so many of our challenges are rooted in people trying to have profit, right? And at some point, we have to decide if grocery stores, because from what I understand, they make very little money. If grocery stores are going to be in it, if the needs of people will come secondary to profit, right? Like, we have to figure out what that is and how we go about doing that. I don't think South Jackson needs a Kroger, right? Like, I don't think we need any more corporate anything. I do think we need to find and identify ways to connect people with the things that they need in ways that really engage where people are, but push them further and closer to where they need to be. I think the farmers market on High Street is a brilliant idea, right? Like, I think it is a brilliant idea. I don't think it is very well executed, right? One of the things that's always interesting to me is I will go into the farmers market and I will see food with stickers on it. And I would be confused by that. Not because food doesn't have stickers on it, but I thought it was locally grown food. To find out that lots of those things, lots may be a stretch, but some of those things aren't locally grown. And what does that mean if that is what we're selling and we're not able to meet that need, right? Like, if we are selling it as a thing that it is not, Like that's a real challenge. So how do we get people to recognize that our diets should be more local, right? Like there are things that we should only have at certain times, but because of what capitalism does, it teaches us that, you know, the world serves America, and that we can have a strawberry outside of strawberry season because other people are able to grow that, and then we're able to ship those things in. Our diets need to change and need to be more seasonal. And I think creating a space to get food that teaches people that is really important. And it is a great opportunity if we have a desire to create that type of world. And sometimes, and by sometimes I mean all the time, more times than not, by a lot, I wonder if we have the stomach to change our ways from how addicted to convenience we are.
Yeah, that's really good. I think convenience really drives it, and like you were talking about with profit. So, Dr. Ayers, how do we get people to be more supportive of local farms and to want to invest within the local farming system? And what have you seen? What have you actually seen in Jackson? Have people been very supportive, and are you wanting people to be more supportive? And where are we on the spectrum of that? And how do we get more people on board?
Well, I think, and I'm hoping everybody can hear me, I'm thinking there's a threefold to all of this. You know, first of all, when we talk about access, we are people or creatures of habit, and we want some of the better things. And my whole part about that, I don't think anything is wrong with that. However, I do feel strongly that as a market, and I do participate in the farmers market and bringing my goods, but there's also things that we cannot grow here in Mississippi any time of the year. Bananas, things that we need, apples, not enough or abundancy of it. A lot of the fruits that we want and we need in our diet, we do not grow here in Mississippi, not just on my farm, but in Mississippi overall. So I think as a farmer's market or a farmer inside the market, I understand why other products that we don't grow has to be in the market, because we do want to be able to bring access to our customers and clients. But there's a balance, there's a mix. Yes, we want more support from the farmers, for farmers inside of the farmers market. But at the same time, we know that people are going to buy and spend, and they're going to want things that are good for them and some things that are not. But at the farmers market and as a farmer, we try to diverse and grow different things that's normally not grown in Mississippi. You know, for instance, we are growing things like callaloo, which is attracting people to eat something different. We're doing things like bok choy, not traditionally grown in Mississippi, but we can grow. But when we try our hand at other things, we don't have the climate for avocados, or we don't have the climate for being able to grow oranges or grapes. Muscadine, yeah, but again, and have a market for that at the farmer's market. But as a farmer, and I can tell you, we work very hard to bring in as fresh as possible, as healthy as possible, as green as possible into the market. But at the same time, we have to understand that it's not going to change overnight. We want more support. We encourage everyone to come to the farmer's market to eat fresh as much as you can. But we also encourage you to look at growing some things yourself, to look at becoming a little bit more self-efficient with some things. I'm not saying become a farmer or tear up your backyards or to do this, but I am saying you should try your hand at growing some herbs. Look at some basil, or look at some Swiss chard as a green, or even lettuce. Some things that you can just get and taste and get truly a good taste for things. But as a farmer here, I can speak for Footprint Farms. We partner with a lot of farmers throughout the state, and we try to bring in different parts of the state into one location. And I'm hoping so much that other farmers markets can come to life in other part of our city. I'm hoping one in South Jackson. I would love to be a part of that, Josephus, to work to bring something in. But you have to have the farmers to be able to grow it.
to be able to bring it in. But we also need to go one step further. We need to start looking at added value products right here in our city for some of the goods that we can't sell. No, let's not throw those tomatoes away. Let's make tomato sauce. Let's do more value added. Let's do more soup starters. And let's put this in our stores that people can reach and can still purchase. I know we have food deserts and food swamps, but I'm saying let's utilize these food places, these places that are in our community, and let's stock those shelves with alternatives that people can actually get in to buy and to start eating healthier. And I'm all for that. I'm all for businesses. I am a corporate business, so profit is important, but I know for a fact that you can live within your means and make profit and still help and do major things for our community. And that's our vow as Footprint Farms, to make sure we continue to do that and to encourage others.
Yeah, no, that's great. One thing that I think about with this is how do we transition people from eating fast food and their dietary habits right now that's super addictive fried foods. You know, Mississippi has a very specific food type. How do we transition people to want to be eating healthier? Chigo, would you mind just sort of responding to that? Because I know you're working primarily in this space.
Yes, I think that's a very great question. And I think a lot of scholars have put a lot of brain power behind trying to figure that out. And it's something that has taken a lot of thought and trial and error to try to get behavior change. It really does come down to behavior change. And one of the key things that you talked about is addictive behavior. And a lot of times we think about eating disorders and the way people eat and diets and culture as something that's easy to change. But when you throw in addictiveness, it is hard, and it's a journey that a lot of people have to go through. Some people go through it a lot easier. Others, they have to take on a bigger challenge, and it's a lot harder for those individuals. I think it's really important that we understand that each individual is going to be unique on how they take this journey and how they create that change. But it's something that is going to take time and for each individual and for communities and for individuals that are working in this space. You have to understand that this is going to be a journey, and there's going to be a lot of back and forth. There's going to be people that make great, tremendous steps, and then they relapse. And it's kind of a dance that we go back and forth, and then eventually we get to a point to where people have the knowledge. We have to give people that education to know what is right and what's wrong and how to get to that point. But knowledge is not the only thing that is required, right? So we have to give people the capacity to also do or put in that knowledge to work, right? And so we have to connect people to resources. We have to connect people to access. We have to give people what they need to start this journey and to make their journey into fruition. But another part is community. We have to have that support around these groups and these cultures as we try to navigate and change those cultures. It has to be some type of support. So it's not just the communities by itself, but it has to be those policies that support it. It has to be those corporations and those organizations that are going to be there that in the access points so that people can have access to these different things, as well as promote healthy behavior and healthy diets, right? And so plenty of us have walked into any grocery store and they have these big displays, especially around holiday seasons, football season, basketball season, March Madness, all these different things. You walk in there and the display is not somebody built up from apples or bananas or anything like that. It's stacks of beers or it's chips or it's soda, all those different things that we're trying to avoid. But all of those are those triggers for those individuals that have those addictive behaviors. I mean, it's easy to drive down the street and you see all these fast food restaurants and you're hungry, and it's triggering your mind. Well, I'm tired. I'd rather just go ahead and grab this quickly instead of going home and trying to cook, even if I do meal prep. Sometimes, so it's been 3 days. That burger sounds pretty good. I can taste it already. And so how do we kind of get those kind of different coping mechanisms back into it? And it's a balance between health, mental health, and spiritual health that we can all bring together from a community. And again, as a community, drive us to a more healthy culture.
And if I can on that one, I think it's still moderation. I don't think it would ever stop, but I go back to creating a pattern for yourself. But you also got to look at, again, a big part of this is having access. And I think Josephus said it best, is that, you know, it's easy to say you should change your ways, but then when you go down your street or your community, and this is still all you have that's in there, how do you change that? I mean, I have no transportation. I'm still walking. And then when I do get transportation to go, I got to go 10 miles away after I pay somebody to do that. But yet still, when I get to that store, it's still not the quality that's needed. So, you know, it's easy to say this to everyone, you know, don't stop, don't do this, but they have to have an alternative. They still have to be able to get to food in order to eat. And we have to think about the whole holistic part of this and what we need to do to make a difference. And community is a big part of this. Travis, policy is a big part of this. We have to start looking at and start putting more into implementing the good policies and policies that we should have in place for all citizens. It should be access for everyone, not just for certain zip codes.
Right. I think it's going to be about compromise. It's not going to be one extreme or the other. We got to meet in the middle and then work towards the positives.
Yeah, and also, you know, the role of urban planning and urban design and how we spatially organize our communities and what exists within the communities. I think, Chico, you were talking about just that drive or walk home when you see that fast food restaurant. It's lit up. It's the biggest thing in your face, and it looks great. That's a type of messaging that we see. But could you imagine, you know, walking past agricultural landscape within the city and sort of having an abundance of, I don't know, local food options and things that are a little bit healthier and just almost the complete opposite of what you mostly see. I really think it's going to require an abundance of food options, healthy food options within all communities to really make a difference. But the role of urban planning and how we've redlined over the years and where we're clustering fast food restaurants, clustering corner stores, it's very clear on what it's all by design. So I think that, you know, the role of urban planning and how we just reorganize how we're living is a huge part of the food access conversation, but it also is part of health, mobility, learning. All these things are very intertwined and interdisciplinary, and I think all you guys believe that. And I wish that there was a silver bullet solution for this problem, but I think that this conversation is really, really good. I think that we've touched on some great stuff. Did anyone have any closing remarks that you would like to make just about the future of food here in Jackson and Mississippi, the state in general?
Well, of course, I'll never pass the opportunity when you ask. One of the things we have to do is continue this conversation on talking about policy change and talking about access and about how we build our communities, how we go back into our communities, and also how we look at doing value added, not just to food, but to our whole communities, and making that accessible and available. And I pledged to continue to do what we're doing here, in spite of naysayers. We're still going to push to bring the best and everything that's possible that we can do within our power and our partnerships. And that's the other good part. We need to partner more. I'm so excited to do work now with a lot of different organizations, even more so now with the health department. We're looking to do more and to come together out of these silos and put our resources together, lay out a plan, and let's implement. Let's do what we know we need to do. We have a lot of the resources. It's just where they are and how we access them. Go team. Let's do it. We can, and we should, and we will.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think we just need to continue to find ways to navigate the current systems that we are, to move to a process to where at least we're at a point where the healthy choice is the easy choice. I think that's where we're trying to work towards. We're making the healthy choice the easy choice, whether it's through policy, actions, or community capacity building.
Great. Well, I really appreciate the conversation, guys. Nafisa, if you will link all of our resources, Footprint Farms, the Mississippi State Department of Health, and the Fertile Ground Project, as well as the other resources we provided in the documentary discussion guide. I really appreciate the conversation, everyone. I wish we could be doing it in person someday, and maybe we will next year, hopefully. Yeah. But thank you to all of you, and continue the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Wash your hands.
Please, all of it. Social distance.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Wear a mask.